Good afternoon, Chuck Morse, Left Right Radio, every afternoon live here at Facebook at noon and syndicated on YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, and now Spotify. Thank you very much. I don't have a lot on the plate today other than to just make a couple of observations that based on conversations I've heard today on talk radio, which is a major source for me information-wise. The first thought that I have is that MSNBC, it's just a classic attack on President Trump. I've been listening to them since the election and before. I have never heard them say a single good thing about Trump. Maybe every so often they shruggingly will say something is good on Morning Joe, one of the guests. But for the most part, it's this relentless attack that borders on propaganda. The main thrust today, because I think they're running out of things to talk about, is twofold. Number one, they continue to try to goad President Trump personally. They think they can get him to fire Special Prosecutor Mueller and Assistant Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. They're just every day, week after week, month after month. When is he going to fire Mueller? Will he fire Mueller? He's about to fire Mueller. Is Mueller fired? And, there's nothing they want more, obviously, because then there'll be a constitutional crisis. That is the mantra. Of course, this so-called constitutional crisis will only happen if Trump actually fires Mueller. And whether or not it is a constitutional crisis, of course, is a major question. I would suggest it's not. But they just want to goad him into doing this. And President Trump seems to be onto it. He even said, look, they've been asking me this almost daily for the past 5 months, and I haven't done it. And hopefully he won't do it. I think the best thing for him to do is to continue to have his surrogates investigate Mueller and show what a hack he is and discredit him. In a sense, the same way that Bill Clinton had his surrogates attack Kenneth Starr. Mueller probably doesn't have anything, so they figure if he fires him, then they'll have that to talk about. That will be another example of obstruction of justice. And of course, the entire premise of an obstruction of justice is dependent upon them proving this cockamamie conspiracy theory that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to get elected. Of course, the second prong of their attack is to dig into President Trump's sex life. And it's just really low and really tacky and ugly. It's like the MSNBC especially and the major networks. It's like they're the National Enquirer. It's awful. Listening to David Mueller, for God's sake, on CBS or whatever the hell he's on, talking about, putting all this time into talking about Stormy Daniels. She was some hooker that Trump had a one-night affair with 10 years ago, and they're giving it all this time. It's disgusting, and it's really despicable, and it shows how low they've sunk, how much they've got nothing on them, and they'll just do anything to try to hobble his brilliant agenda, which is really making a major difference in this country. Because they're not going to talk about the real news, which is that thanks to a secret meeting between Kim Jong-un and Secretary of State designate Mike Pompeo, the talks between Trump and Un are going forward, and that these talks could result in an amazing, major development on the world stage in terms of getting them to maybe reduce their nuclear footprint and maybe even move toward peace and reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula, something that nobody ever thought would happen. Certainly the South Koreans didn't think it would happen. And, these advances are made directly due to President Trump's policies of standing up very toughly to North Korea. Now, presidents in the past, both Democrats and Republicans, have made noises against North Korea, but the North Koreans know that that's just a lot of crap. That's just a lot of posturing. as they continue to advance their nuclear facilities. But with President Trump, they know he means it. And so they are responding in kind. Other major developments, the increase in manufacturing jobs in this country, the fact that communist China now has backed down in their threats to a trade war, and that they accept the fact that there has to be some adjustments that would favor the United States, and that it's only fair to do that, and that they can absorb those adjustments without raising the price of goods and services to this country. They're coming to realize that those adjustments are reasonable and that they are fair to both sides, and that they will preserve and help develop American industry and protect American labor. These are significant developments. These are major developments. And yet they don't want to talk about that. They'd rather talk about some hooker Trump hooked up with 10 years ago. Who cares? They're critical of conservatives. I mean, this is the way they think, that conservatives now are defending this. No, they're not. Conservatives think it's horrible. But conservatives, first of all, they put it in the perspective that Donald Trump today appears to be a very different man than he was back then. First of all, he's become a conservative and he's become Republican, and he understands, bigger questions of life. I don't think that he's involved in the kind of shenanigans he was involved in when he was a liberal Democrat screwing around with women and not being fair and faithful to his wives. I mean, I don't think there's any question that those are failings, and those are not admired by conservatives. They're just out there. Okay, now the other thing I want to talk about is the healthcare question, socialized healthcare. Americans don't seem to care about this issue as much as they did a couple of years ago. We now know that the Republicans in Congress betrayed us. They made a lot of posture, a lot of standing about rescinding this federalized healthcare system, this Obamacare, when Obama was president, knowing that nothing would come of it. Now that Trump is president and he's ready to sign the rescission of this horrible program, they're not going to do it because they never intended to do it in the first place. They're beholden to these big interests, the healthcare industry, and ideologically they believe in a controlled and managed healthcare system run by the state. Some of them might even think that there's something virtuous about this, that somehow it's actually going to help people's health. Well, this is what I want to say about it at this point, and this is more of a philosophical comment. The whole idea of government coming in and controlling an issue like this, someone's personal health care, their relationship with their doctor, their ability to make choices on an open market with regard to what sort of modalities they need or want to help improve and preserve their own health. This is a major appeal to the left. In fact, it's one of the most foundational elements of leftism going back to the early part of the 19th century and the thinking of people like Thomas Malthus and Charles Darwin. And that is that this is a reemergence in a nicer sounding package of what used to be called eugenics, which of course was a term that was coined by Charles Darwin's cousin and close collaborator, Francis Galton. And that meant, valuable life. That when the government comes in and they start to control the ability of people to make choices in healthcare, inevitably, and I think it's been proven, this is going to lead to a rationing of healthcare, a narrowing of what's available on the open market, decisions by the government in terms of who will live and who will die. If you don't believe me on Obamacare, take a look at the works of Ezekiel Emanuel, who is one of the wunderkinds and masterminds behind Obamacare. He's Rahm Emanuel's brother. Rahm Emanuel, now mayor of Chicago, then Obama chief of staff, in where he talks about which type of healthcare will be provided to which person based upon their age, based upon their level of health, based upon their income. In other words, the government is going to decide which life is more valuable. And they set up a system of CORI scores, C-O-R-I scores. And this was very much what Sarah Palin accurately described death panels, where they would rate people applying for health care and decide what level of health care they'd get based upon the government's decision on the value of their life, their age, whether they might be too old or too young for that matter, if they're newborns, to qualify for certain health modalities, and which health care run by the government with the government profiting as opposed to private industry and insurance, they're going to manage it. They're going to ration it, and they have done so in every condition where it's been tried. You know, the British like to talk about their wonderful healthcare system. Well, when they keep their statistics, they don't count the number of people who have died because they did not get healthcare that was allowed, because they had doctors tell them what to do, because healthcare was restricted, because there wasn't the kind of creativity that is required in the medical profession to invent new ideas and to create new modalities to save people. And that ultimately they don't believe in preserving life. I mean, they're into this hospice movement, and I'm not against it, but it's a free choice. But if you have government-run healthcare, they're going to decide whether they're going to put you in a hospice. That I would bet my life on. That's inevitable. They're going to decide whether or not you live or you die. That's eugenics. That is the government deciding. That is what Fritz Rudin, the Nazi eugenicist, who was a very close friend and collaborator of Margaret Sanger, by the way, and who wrote articles for her newsletter, that they decided that there's a German term for it, which I don't know offhand, but a life worth living is basically what it comes down to. And all I can tell you is that we have to understand regarding Obamacare, the actual philosophical root of this, why this is such a major cause of the left, because the left and leftism wants to control your life ultimately with their massive international nanny state, because they think they're smarter than you with regard to what is right in life. They don't believe in God. They think that human beings are just resources. And the ultimate expression of that kind of control is to control your health and decide which health modalities you should have or not have based upon whether they deem you are of a value to them and to their demented idea of human and social progress. So I would suggest that free healthcare, when I say free, I'm not saying, that you're not paid for. I mean, free, you have a free to choose healthcare. That is social justice, not government-run healthcare. And I'm not suggesting that the government can't be involved in it. In this great country of ours, we want to make sure that everyone gets at least a modicum of health care, especially if they have catastrophic illnesses and can't afford it. But it can be done without the government involvement. It can be done with maybe some government subsidies in certain cases if a person applies for them. And I'd point out that cases of catastrophic illness where a person was not covered by their insurance company because the insurance company, they were outside of the contract, those are actually pretty rare. And those are actually cases that I think the American taxpayers would be willing to pay for. If a person cannot get an insurance company to pay for their catastrophic illness and they request that coverage at least and are turned down at least twice, then I would think that the government could step in a case like that and subsidize the insurance company to make sure that they get the necessary coverage, or even set up a national or even a state pool that would assume the cost of that health care for that person. In fact, if they did this, then it would actually reduce the premiums and deductions for your average citizen, because it would take those cases off of the role of the insurance company, and that insurance would thus go down exponentially because the cost of medicine for that insurance company would go down. So there are modalities that could be applied that would involve some government involvement only in catastrophic cases where a person really could not get insurance, or because they're indigent, in which case they could get Medicaid. There's nothing wrong with having some matching funds for those things. I think the taxpayers would tolerate that because we want to make sure that everyone has access to basic health care. But it can be done in such a way that is entirely free market with some government involvement in cases of emergency, and that you ultimately will then have the right to choose your own health care. I would also support a national effort to educate people with regard to improving their health, so that we can be healthier and we don't need so much health care. And that means things like what is in our foods, what are these highly processed additives, and what are they doing to our health, and things like that. There are basic ways we can live that would improve our health, that we don't have to be as sick as maybe we are. And we could thus not require as much health care. That's something we don't talk about in this country. All we talk about is how to pay for terrible diseases. We don't talk about how to reduce these numbers of diseases and how to improve our health. So I'm going to finish this talk just by mentioning from my own experience a couple of things that seem very simple, and maybe they are simple, but they are occurring to me as I get older. Now that I'm over 60 and I am different, I feel different than I did when I was, younger. I am becoming aware of certain things that can help me preserve my health, hopefully longer, God willing and science willing. And those things are very simple. I'm going to mention two. And I know it almost sounds infantile, but here it is. I would suggest that every day you stop and make sure that you are breathing properly, that you are inhaling oxygen, that you are oxygenating your entire body. Breathe into your head, feel the cool air swirl around the back of your neck and your head. Breathe into your extremities, breathe into your fingers and your toes. Make sure with a little vigorous breathing, a little holding of the air, just, holding one nostril and breathing in and out, that you are fully oxygenated every single day. We don't take the time to do this. This is why, this is a way to help the body fight off disease. You start to realize that it's a great moment to sort of take stock in terms of where you are at, to use an old 60s expression. To sort of say, hey, I'm not the same physically as I was maybe when I was in my 20s or 30s, but I am in many ways better than I've ever been at any point in my life because of my experience and because of who I am today. And take stock of that. Don't be negative. We're not the same. We can't be physically as strong as we were when we were younger in many ways. We may have certain ailments. I mean, it's natural. That's life. But we can take stock of what we do have physically and breathe into it and improve it and strengthen it for where we are now. And it'll give us a sense of optimism and a sense of looking forward to the future, and will help us and help our bodies fight various ailments, because we can. We can do a lot more just by breathing, and a lot more by drinking good quality water every day. And I actually, it's been recommended to me by actually a Chinese herbalist that I drink hot water. I guess this is very popular in Asian countries, and I think it's a good idea. I feel better for doing it. That cold water and ice water is actually not that good for you, apparently, according to this herbalist. And so every day I drink a glass of hot water, boiled water. In fact, I do it before this show, and it helps warm the cells and warm the body. And these little things can help improve your health. So to wrap it up, the enemies of President Trump are the enemies of every American listening to this program. Whether you are liberal, conservative, left, or right, take a look at his agenda and the fact that it is pro-life, pro-human, pro-citizen. pro everything that is natural to Americans in this country. And for that matter, it's an example to the rest of the world for other nations to be very much in favor of their own nation states, because that is a progressive idea. And healthcare is eugenics. I mean, that is the Obamacare system. That is the philosophical underpinnings of it. It's the ultimate dream of the left, to control who lives and who dies. It's a natural extension of their authoritarian fantasies and agenda. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Check out my books. They're available at Amazon.com. Sign up, hopefully, for my, if you will, on my YouTube channel. I'm trying to build a subscriber list there. It's easy to subscribe. It's free. If you subscribe, you can always unsubscribe if you want. You'll get the daily program plus special editions, and it's available on all of those other subscriptions that I mentioned: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn. Anyway, thanks everybody, and have a great and well-oxygenated day.